Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the incredibly fascinating and honestly deeply ironic life of Raja Sansar Chand. We're going to unpack a classic historical paradox, how one ruler's extreme military hubris completely lost him a massive empire, but how his visionary, almost obsessive patronage of the arts won him absolute historical immortality. So here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the legacy of the Ir Fort, then move into restoring the Katoch dynasty, the golden age of Kangra, his fatal clash with the Gorkhas, his struggles with the Mughal and Sikh empires, and finally his cultural immortality through art. Starting with Section 1, the legacy of the Ir Fort. To really understand this, we need to anchor our story in geography. His highly strategic seat of power sat about 215 kilometers from modern-day Shimla, right at the confluence of the Bangaga and Patalganga rivers. Now, what's really wild about this location is how the physical architecture of the fort literally defined the identity of the entire region. The fortress was built in this very distinct shape of an ear, or Khan in Hindi, and this incredible architectural quirk gave us the name Kangar, which actually evolved over time into the name of the entire valley, Kangra. Moving on to Section 2, restoring the Katoch dynasty. To truly grasp Sansar Chand's regional legitimacy, we have to look back at the deep ancestral roots of the Katoch lineage, who actually began ruling this exact area way back in the 11th century CE. The Katoch dynasty's history is essentially a masterclass in brutal administrative struggles against massive expansionist empires. For instance, in 1333, they completely routed a 10,000-strong army sent by the Delhi Sultanate. But the mighty Mughal Empire proved to be a much tougher opponent. By 1556, they were forced to submit to Akbar's forces. And then, in 1620, Emperor Jahangir actually killed the Katoch king and fully annexed the Kangra Fort. To put that into perspective, for over a century and a half, the ruling family was entirely locked out of their own stronghold. So, the absolutely crucial turning point is how this young son of the soil expertly exploited a weakened central rule. By the mid-18th century, the Mughal Empire was crumbling. Sansar Chand, who was literally just 16 years old at the time, forged a highly tactical alliance with the Kanayayamiz, a prominent Sikh group in Punjab. Together, in 1774, they recaptured the Kangra Fort. After 154 years of Mughal occupation, a Katoch was finally back in the Ir Fort. Which brings us to Section 3, the Golden Age of Kangra. Back in his ancestral home, Sansar Chand's reign quickly crested into an era of unprecedented growth. And he went on an absolute conquest spree. By the 1800s, he commanded a massive, sprawling 27,000-square-mile empire. We're talking about taking over Chamba, Mundi, Suket, Nahan, and pushing his borders all the way up to Jammu. He easily became one of the most powerful rulers in the entire region. But he wasn't just a warlord, he was a profound aesthete. He took the immense wealth from these conquests and channeled it directly into the 36 karkhanas. These were 36 specialized, state-sponsored workshops dedicated entirely to distinct arts and crafts. Under his visionary patronage, these workshops essentially became an engine of cultural production, generating an astonishing 40,000 individual Kangra paintings. That is a staggering number. This wasn't just local art. This level of production and quality brought unprecedented fame to the region across the entirety of India. At his absolute peak, ruling from his newly built splendid Durbar halls and gardens in Tirasujanpur, he was universally known by a very triumphant title, the Pahardi Badshah, the Emperor of the Hills. He literally had it all: supreme military dominance and unmatched cultural wealth. But then we hit Section 4, his fatal clash with the Gorkhas. This is exactly where tactical hubris brings his golden age to a crashing, violent halt. The Emperor of the Hills decided he just wanted a little bit more territory. So, in 1805, he launched an unprovoked attack on the small neighboring kingdom of Kalor. And this was a spectacular mistake. The desperate Raja of Kalor immediately appealed to the incredibly powerful Gorkhas of Nepal for military aid. And right here is the fatal tactical flaw in Sansar Chand's military composition. He relied heavily on Rohilla Pathan mercenaries. Now, these were fighters from the plains of Rohilkhand. Excellent soldiers, for sure, but totally unsuited for the mountains. In stark contrast, they were facing an enemy force of 40,000 Gorkhas, and the Gorkhas were the supreme, undisputed masters of hill warfare.
The mercenaries were simply no match for them. Sansar Chand's plains fighters were crushed, and fort after fort fell.
Moving to Section 5, Mughal and Sikh struggles. By 1809, with his empire completely collapsing, Sansar Chand was forced into a very desperate corner.
What followed was a masterclass in diplomatic outmaneuvering, but unfortunately for Sansar Chand, he was not the master. In a total panic, he turned to Maharaja Ranjit Singh of Punjab, promising him the Kangra Fort in exchange for military help. But get this, simultaneously, he promised the exact same deal to the Gorkhas, just to get them to back off. He clearly thought he could keep both sides fighting while he secretly kept the fort. But the shrewd Ranjit Singh easily saw right through this double dealing. Ranjit Singh cut off the Gorkha supplies, defeating them, and when Sansar Chand tried to back out of the deal, Ranjit Singh simply took Sansar Chand's son hostage and forcefully seized the Kangra Fort anyway.
So, the mighty Emperor of the Hills lost almost everything he had built. He was drastically reduced to these truly humiliating administrative terms. His vast empire became a small personal estate, a jagir. He was slapped with a massive annual financial penalty of 200,000 rupees, and he had to live entirely subordinate to the Lahore Durbar. Finally, Section 6, Cultural Immortality Through Art. Because despite his crushing military and administrative failures, the final chapter of his life reveals an incredible irony. Exiled to his estate in Tirasujanpur, utterly defeated and humiliated on the battlefield, he made a fascinating pivot. He entirely abandoned the sword for the brush. He took whatever remaining energy, resources, and time he had and poured it into deeply patronizing poets, musicians, and most importantly, his artists. And what you should take away from this is how a kingdom's legacy is truly secured. His massive 27,000 square mile empire completely evaporated. It fell to the Sikhs and then later to the British in 1849. But his 36 workshops successfully preserved his cultural identity forever. Today, the breathtaking wall paintings at Tirasujanpur, the temple architecture, and the priceless Kangra art housed in modern museums remain completely intact. I want to leave you with this thought to ponder. Sansar Chand proved to be a deeply flawed tactician, but an absolutely unmatched visionary of the arts. As the enduring legacy of the Emperor of the Hills proves, borders are easily erased, but sometimes a paintbrush truly outlasts a sword. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.